She was slammed against the hood, cuffs snapped tight, a knee pressed into her back. The officer smirked. No badge, no backup. She's done. Across the street, a child cried. A live stream light blinked red. Bystanders whispered. She must have done something serious. She didn't scream, didn't beg. She just stared at him, like a blade slicing through lies. He thought she was weak. He thought she was alone. He thought she was just another black pawn on a white man's board. But the woman he just arrested was a covert CIA operative. Call sign, Sable for Echo. Where are you watching from? Could this happen where you live? Welcome to Mr. 7 Stories. If this story hits you, like it, subscribe, and stay with us. Because right now, you're about to learn why Michaela Trenton made the whole system shake. The late afternoon sun spilled across the marble steps of North Shore Federal Court in Briarfield, North Carolina, like a thin veil draped over secrets waiting to erupt. Inside Courtroom 2A, the silence was so dense, you could hear the scratch of the court clerk's fountain pen against paper. The heavy doors creaked open, and every head turned toward the black woman walking in, her hands cuffed at the waist. Michaela Trenton, 34 years old, stood just under 5'5". She walked quietly, head held high. Her face bore the exhaustion of 3 nights in holding at the Briarfield Police Division, but her gaze remained razor-sharp. Behind her, 2 officers flanked her, Detective Bryce Kellerman and Officer Trevor Haskins. Both wore deep Navy uniforms, their shoulders square like men parading a hard-won trophy. They claimed Michaela was caught red-handed. A duffel bag in her trunk, nearly 30 pounds of pure cocaine. A perfectly timed win for the Briarfield Police Department, which had been under pressure from the mayor's office to deliver results in the city's new zero-tolerance drug crackdown. Local headlines ran bold. Evening News on Channel 9, and the Briarfield Courier called it, Maple Hollow Mystery Woman, key player in major smuggling ring. But something didn't add up. She didn't act like a drug dealer. No screaming, no desperate denials, no blame games. She simply sat, silent, and occasionally she looked Kellerman dead in the eye, with a stare that made him look away. According to her file, Michaela lived alone in Maple Hollow, in a modest house with a carefully trimmed front yard, no criminal record, no debt, nothing unusual in her bank statements. She had been a teaching assistant at Willow Bend Learning Center, a volunteer school for underprivileged kids. The community described her as quiet, kind, and educated. So why was she here? Facing up to 15 years in federal prison? Detective Kellerman had an answer. She was spotted exchanging a suspicious item with a known drug offender. We surveilled, searched the vehicle, and found a large quantity of cocaine. Officer Haskins added, voice shaking slightly but trying to sound firm, we followed protocol. The evidence is solid. But when defense attorney Derek Vaughn, a sharp-eyed black man in his late 30s, took the case, he immediately sensed something was wrong. It's too neat, too convenient for the prosecution. He told Michaela's mother, Dolores Trenton, in a quiet hallway outside the courtroom. Feels like someone built the stage for a show that already has an ending. Dolores just nodded, gripping her purse, lips pressed tight. She grew up between me and her father, a veteran journalist. She's known right from wrong since preschool. From the gallery, a few of Michaela's friends watched in stunned silence. They couldn't believe the woman, who taught their kids how to read and spell, was now being paraded like a hardened criminal. But what no one in that courtroom knew was that they weren't just trying a woman falsely accused. They were brushing against a hidden force, capable of bringing down the very system they served. Because Michaela Trenton wasn't just a volunteer teacher. She wasn't just a peaceful resident of Maple Hollow. She was Sable for Echo, a covert CIA operative who had infiltrated extremist cells from Mali to Moldova. And now she was being framed by the very country she swore to protect. Today's court hearing wasn't just the start of a trial. It was a trigger for a political and moral earthquake, one that would leave no one in that courtroom untouched. Across the worn tile hallway of North Shore Federal Court, Detective Bryce Kellerman sat alone in the witness lounge, his hands clasped tightly between his knees. He'd handled more dangerous cases than this. Gun traffickers, biker hit squads, even human smugglers. But never had he felt this kind of weight. Not guilt, fear. Michaela Trenton wasn't like the others he had set up. She didn't shout, didn't lash out, didn't break. Her calm unsettled him, like she knew far more than she let on. That look in her eyes had kept him up for 3 straight nights. The entire arrest had been part of a quiet arrangement, a debt Kellerman owed to the most powerful man in Briarfield's underworld, Gideon Strathmore. Gideon wasn't your flashy drug kingpin. No clubs, no penthouse parties. He dressed sharp, played golf at elite country clubs, and donated generously to the local education fund. But beneath the Italian silk ties was a criminal empire that stretched from Savannah to Charlotte. Years ago, Gideon had helped Kellerman a discreet sum of money that made his son's vehicular manslaughter charge vanish. No paperwork, no threats, just a 3-minute phone call, and the case disappeared from the system. Since then, Kellerman owed him, and now Gideon wanted payback, a headline-grabbing arrest. Someone clean, disconnected, someone the media could run with without digging too deep. He wanted a scapegoat. Michaela Trenton fit perfectly. She lived alone, no family in the legal system, no loud friends, a reading tutor. Simple life in Maple Hollow. On paper, she was like 100 other black women in the neighborhood. But the first time Kellerman watched her, he felt it. Something didn't align. That night, when Officer Trevor Haskins quietly placed a duffel bag full of cocaine into Michaela's sedan trunk, his hands trembled. "You sure about this?" Haskins asked, voice cracking. Kellerman replied without looking up, "Just do it. You don't want to cross Strathmore." Trevor didn't know much. Just a rookie caught in a game far bigger than him. But now that it had begun, neither of them could stop the machine they'd helped build. Kellerman told himself, "She'll crack." Fear, pressure, they all do. But since the arrest, Michaela hadn't begged once. She hadn't flinched. She just looked at him like she knew everything already. And that made Kellerman shiver. Somewhere deep in his mind, after years of bending justice, a question whispered back, if she's not like the others, who exactly are we framing? Because those who back a CIA operative into a corner may find they've trapped themselves instead. In the cold cell at Briarfield Police Division, fluorescent light spilled harsh and pale over the rusted metal cot. Michaela Trenton sat with her back against the wall, her wrists still marked from the cuffs. Another woman in the cell had already dozed off, snoring gently in rhythm. But Michaela didn't sleep. She couldn't, not out of fear, but calculation. 3 nights now. She remained silent through every interrogation. She hadn't given a single clue about who she really was. Grilled by both Detective Kellerman and Officer Haskins, Michaela said only 3 words. "I'm innocent." Nothing more. Nothing less. Inside her mind, the pieces moved like chess on a board. She remembered the protocol from Site 12, Fenwick Facility. In any situation, the first thing you protect isn't your life. It's the information. In the CIA, identity was never just a name. It was a gateway, a thread leading back to an entire unseen structure operating beneath the surface. Michaela, or more accurately, Sable, for Echo, had completed 17 international missions. In Nigeria, she infiltrated a trafficking network disguised as an NGO. In Ukraine, she posed as a journalist to map an arms route to the Baltic. Each mission required her to vanish into a role so deeply that even she sometimes forgot what was real and what was constructed. She spoke fluent French and Spanish. She could read a threat in the twitch of an eye, a shift in breath, the placement of a hand. But here, inside a rotting jail cell, under a decaying police department, Michaela faced a challenge she'd never trained for, betrayal by the very system she once protected. What made this moment more dangerous wasn't the evidence. It was the rigidity of procedure and the blind worship of ink on paper. Here, 2 officer statements outweighed 10 years of covert service. Top secret memos filed under Protocol Iron Veil. Classified briefings she'd submitted from Congo war zones. All meaningless now, if she couldn't speak. But if she did speak, what then? Only Jasper Monroe, her point of contact at the agency, knew she was in custody. He had left a single encrypted message in the secure inbox. Hold. Review pending. Michaela knew what it meant. CIA wouldn't intervene, unless the situation escalated to a national security threat. Until then, she was considered a temporarily deactivated asset. In plain terms, she was on her own. She closed her eyes. In her mind, she rebuilt the scene, the position of the duffel bag in her trunk, the way Officer Haskins wouldn't meet her eyes, and the way Kellerman smirked while reciting her Miranda rights, like he was reading a bedtime joke. Michaela didn't flinch. She never had. She once negotiated with a warlord lieutenant in Sierra Leone. As he pressed a pistol to her forehead, she swam through a frozen river in Romania to escape capture. Compared to that, North Shore Federal Court was child's play. The only question was when to play the card, and with whom. She still had an ace, but she wouldn't play it yet, because to break a system from the inside, you wait for the perfect moment. On the 3rd floor of North Shore Federal Court, in a cluttered temporary office filled with document boxes and cold coffee, attorney Derek Vaughn flipped through case files like he was unraveling a murder mystery. Sweat dotted his brow. His right wrist was bandaged from overuse. He hadn't stopped typing for days, but he didn't care. From the first moment he saw the arrest report from Michaela Trenton, he knew something was wrong. The duffel bag containing 28.6 pounds of cocaine was found in the defendant's trunk at 6:47 p.m. Then why did surveillance footage near Maple Hollow capture Michaela at the Willow Bend Community Center at 6:39 p.m., over 4 miles from the scene? The timeline didn't work. Couldn't work. Derek had handled dozens of criminal cases in over a decade of practice. But this one felt different. It was emotionless. Too clean. A script written and rehearsed. Only this time, the lead didn't fit the part. Michaela didn't fit the part. From the moment she looked him straight in the eye. During their first visit. No panic, no begging, just one sentence. Make them show the evidence. You hold the process. I won't be convicted. Those words didn't sound like someone claiming innocence. They sounded like someone who'd faced far worse and survived. Derek didn't know what Michaela was hiding, but he had a feeling she wasn't just another reading tutor. And if she wouldn't talk, he'd have to take the long way around, peel it back layer by layer. That night, while reviewing the police department's internal radio logs, he found something deeply wrong. The timestamp when Officers Kellerman and Haskins reported finding the duffel bag didn't match the time they claimed to have pursued Michaela. It was nearly 12 minutes later. 12 minutes. Long enough for someone to put something in a trunk. And Kellerman was more than capable of altering reports to cover it up. But that wasn't the real surprise. While cross-referencing the submitted evidence tracking numbers, Derek found an item that wasn't listed in the official discovery report. A coded internal audio file labeled Tracelog 147B, attached to the case materials, but unreadable due to encryption. This file came from an IP address outside the police department's network. A forensic tech whispered, handing him a USB drive, uploaded at 2:14 a.m., the day after Michaela's arrest. No one knows who sent it, and it's not listed in the prosecution files. Derek clenched USB like it was a live wire. He knew this was the key. No one accidentally slips an encrypted recording into a case that's supposed to be an open-end shut drug bust. This was a breadcrumb. Someone on the inside. Someone with regret. Or someone under threat. He called his office's top cryptographic analyst and said quietly, "Decrypt this." Quietly. No emails. No chatter. Don't ask why. Derek stood still in the dim light of the war room. Outside, the city of Briarfield was silent, like a forest just before a storm. He looked down at his notebook. where 3 words were underlined in bold over and over. What does she know? There was only one way to find out. And if trace log 147B was what he suspected, then this wasn't about drugs. This was a political time bomb, counting down from the center of the system. That morning, Courtroom 2 at North Shore Federal Court was packed. October wind slipped through the towering windows, stirring the silk curtains, like a warning of something about to break open. Michaela Trenton sat at the defense table. No glasses, no documents in front of her, only a small black notebook resting neatly in her left palm. She wore a deep navy shirt. No jewelry, no makeup, but her presence, her face, made the room hold its breath for just a moment longer than usual. Across from her, Prosecutor Elaine Braxton began her opening statement with a calmness that felt almost sterile. Her voice rang out with practiced rhythm. Ladies and gentlemen, we will show that the defendant participated in an organized drug operation. Physical evidence, officer testimony, and surveillance footage will support this conclusion. But Derek Vaughn only tilted his head slightly. He had been waiting for this moment. The first witness was called, Officer Trevor Haskins. The young officer, barely in his 30s, walked to the stand with a confidence that barely concealed his nerves. When questioned by the prosecution, he stuck to the script. He saw Michaela make a suspicious exchange. He followed her, found the cocaine in her trunk, arrested her on the spot. Then it was Derek's turn, and the room seemed to hold its breath. Officer Haskins, Derek began slowly, I'd like to clarify something. You testified that you observed the defendant at the corner of Mill Street and Jefferson Avenue at 6:47 p.m. Is that correct? Yes, Haskins replied firmly. Derek nodded, then held up a document. This is GPS data from your patrol vehicle's dash cam that evening. It shows your car was still nearly 3.8 miles from that intersection, traveling at 34 miles per hour, at exactly 6:47 p.m. So tell us, officer, from where exactly did you see her? Silence. A flicker of confusion passed over Haskins' eyes. Derek pressed forward. And this, he said, raising another exhibit, is surveillance footage from Willow Bend Learning Center. It shows Michaela speaking with a group of students at 6:39 p.m. There's no way she could have traveled over 4 miles in less than 8 minutes through a speed-controlled 25 miles per hour zone. A ripple of whispers ran through the gallery. One juror furrowed his brow, clearly unsettled. Next came Detective Bryce Kellerman, his gait cold and mechanical. As he took the stand, he echoed Haskins' statement, claiming the duffel bag was found in the trunk while the defendant stood next to the vehicle. Derek stepped forward, eyes locked on Kellerman, like he was staring through him. Detective, you said the bag was found in the trunk, but did you have a warrant to search the vehicle? Kellerman's jaw tightened slightly. Exigent circumstances. The suspect appeared ready to flee. Where was Michaela at that moment? Next to the car. Inside the car? No. Was the engine running? No. Derek paused, then turned to the jury. Then how exactly was she going to flee? She stood less than 2 feet from the vehicle, keys still in her coat pocket, surrounded by 2 armed officers from opposite sides. The room went still. Derek returned to his table and slid out one last folder. He didn't reveal trace log 147B. Not yet, but he knew. The wall was cracking. Every word, every timestamp, every camera was now turning against the very people who had built the case. And in that moment, Michaela's eyes met Derek's. No words, just a quiet nod. They were on the right path. The air in North Shore Federal Court that afternoon was thick, like a thunderstorm holding back its downpour. Not thunder, not lightning. Truth. Judge Vernon Ellery banged his gavel 3 times, calling for order after a morning session filled with unraveling testimony. Cracks had begun to form in the account of Officer Haskins and Detective Kellerman, but not enough to shatter the prosecution's case. Elaine Braxton, steady and composed, still leaned on exigent circumstances, reasonable officer belief, and what she called indisputable physical evidence, nearly 30 pounds of pure cocaine in the defendant's trunk. But what she didn't know was that by afternoon, everything was about to turn. Derek Vaughn exhaled and looked to Michaela. They had discussed this moment. A final move if every other route was blocked. Now, standing in a courtroom packed with reporters, divided jurors, and uncertain witnesses, he asked one last question. "Michaela, are you ready to take the stand?" She nodded, stood slowly, smoothed the front of her shirt, and stepped toward the witness stand. Judge Ellery peered over his reading glasses. "Miss Trenton, do you understand that any statement made here will be subject to perjury under the law?" "Yes, Your Honor." Michaela's voice was clear, steady, unflinching. Derek started simple. "Can you walk us through the night of your arrest?" Michaela recounted leaving Willow Bend Community Center, noticing an unmarked patrol car trailing her, and being approached near the intersection of Mill Street by 2 officers. "I didn't run. I didn't speak to anyone. I had just stepped out of my car. When I was handcuffed." She paused, then turned her gaze directly to Elaine Braxton. "And I had never seen that bag before." Braxton, sensing her opening, stood sharply. "So you were there just to observe?" "For what purpose, Miss Trenton? Are you a journalist, a private investigator, or just a concerned citizen with too much free time?" Derek glanced at Michaela. A subtle nod. She drew a slow, measured breath. "I'm an intelligence officer. Strategic designation, Central Intelligence Agency. Call sign, Sable for Echo. I was assigned to monitor a potential node, linked to Operation Protocol Ironvale. Further details, Your Honor, are classified." The courtroom erupted. Several reporters dropped their pens. A juror's mouth hung open. Elaine Braxton stood frozen, as if someone had driven a fist into her chest. Judge Vernon Ellery slammed his gavel. "Order, order in this court." The pounding echoed, but the ripple of gasps and murmurs was impossible to contain. She wasn't just a defendant. She was CIA. And this story was only beginning. Hit subscribe, because trials like this don't come around often. Michaela stood firm. No arrogance, no rage, just a stillness, like the deep ocean, a presence that made people fear her and admire her. Judge Ellery adjusted his glasses, then signaled both counsels forward. "Miss Trenton," he said, "can you provide verification of this?" "Yes, Your Honor. I've triggered internal confirmation protocols. If permitted to present in a closed session, I can submit documentation from Site 12, Fenwick Facility, as well as encrypted verification from my command unit." A heavy silence swept the room, and in that silence, the jury's collective certainty tipped like a compass thrown against a magnet. Michaela Trenton was no longer just the accused. She was a woman who once carried state secrets in her hands. And now, she was the one peeling back the dirt, buried deeper than any duffel bag could hide. The truth about those manipulating the system from within the police. The air in North Shore Federal Court felt like it had been drained of oxygen. The jury barely moved. A CIA agent arrested for drug trafficking? Old assumptions lay shattered in the wake of a seismic truth. Elaine Braxton looked like she'd been hit by a train. She moved to delay proceedings, but Judge Ellery shut her down. "Justice doesn't wait. For your emotions to catch up, Ms. Braxton," he said coldly, "we proceed." Derek Vaughn didn't hesitate. He lifted the updated witness list in his hand, his eyes scanning toward the far end of the courtroom, where a young female officer sat stiffly, in full uniform, shrinking against the wall like she hoped to disappear. "Your Honor," Derek called out, "the defense requests to call a new witness, Officer Lana Brewster." Another ripple surged through the gallery. That name hadn't been mentioned before. Elaine Braxton shot up in protest, but Judge Ellery simply raised a hand. "If this testimony is pivotal, I want to hear it." Lana Brewster, 28, was a patrol officer with the Briarfield Police Division. She stepped onto the witness stand cautiously, Her hands clenched so tightly her knuckles turned white. She glanced around the courtroom. Then her eyes stopped on Michaela. There was something raw in that look, a flicker of fear, a trace of guilt, and the kind of resolve that only comes after deciding you're done being silent. "Officer Brewster," Derek began, "have you ever overheard any conversations between Detective Kellerman and Officer Haskins regarding Michaela Trenton's case?" Lana swallowed. Her lips parted before her voice finally emerged. "Not Haskins. It was Kellerman and a man over phone." The courtroom held its breath. "I was working night shift in the temporary evidence room," she continued. "Just before 2 a.m., I stepped out to retrieve a file and heard Kellerman in the next room. The door wasn't fully closed. He was on the phone, and I heard him say, 'Don't leave it empty. Stuff it. Heavier the better. She can't flip this. No ID, no backing. This seals the deal with Strathmore.'" An audible gasp rippled across the gallery. Some reporters were already furiously typing. Elaine Braxton leapt to her feet. "Objection! Unverifiable hearsay. No recording. No secondary witness." But Judge Ellery raised a hand. "We will assess admissibility later. Continue." Derek nodded. "Do you have any proof?" Lana hesitated, then slowly reached into her uniform pocket and pulled out a small, outdated voice recorder. "I hadn't planned to keep it," she whispered. "But a few minutes after Kellerman left the room, I went back in. I had left this on the table. After logging my shift notes, it was still recording." The room went still. She extended the device with trembling hands. "I listened to it the next morning. I knew if I turned it in, my career might be over. But after learning Michaela was CIA, I couldn't stay silent. If you believe moments like this deserve to be heard, don't hesitate to hit follow. Every subscription helps us tell more stories that dare to speak truth." Derek stepped forward, took the recorder, then turned toward Elaine with a stare sharp as glass. "This recording will be encrypted and authenticated. But, Your Honor, we've seen fabrication, inconsistent testimonies, GPS camera, and now a police officer willing to risk her badge to speak the truth." Michaela didn't move, but for the first time since the trial began, her fist unclenched. Across the aisle, Detective Kellerman turned away, but no matter which direction he faced, the shadow of the truth was growing, and there was nowhere left to hide. Courtroom 2 at North Shore Federal Court felt frozen in time as Officer Lana Brewster placed a voice recorder on the witness stand. A moment later, the speakers crackled. The gallery leaned in. "Don't leave it empty. Stuff it. Heavier the better. She can't flip this. No ID, no backing. This seals the deal with Strathmore." The voice was low, raspy, certain. Detective Bryce Kellerman. Unmistakable. At the prosecution table, Elaine Braxton glared at the device, as if it had just burned down her career. She opened her mouth to speak, but Judge Vernon Ellery beat her to it. "Prosecutor Braxton," he said slowly, each word hitting the hardwood floor like a gavel of its own. "This court cannot ignore a direct audio recording, implicating fabrication of evidence and collusion with an organized criminal actor." A court officer stepped forward and whispered into the judge's ear. He nodded, then turned to address the room. "The defense has just submitted the decrypted copy of Trace Log 147B. It contains a communications trail linking Detective Kellerman, Officer Haskins, and a number registered to Gideon Strathmore, currently under federal investigation." A checkmate, unmistakable. The rear courtroom doors burst open. 2 federal agents in gray suits stepped inside, badges visible and unwavering. Federal agents, one announced, voice firm and clear, "By emergency arrest order signed by the Eastern District Court of North Carolina, we are placing Detective Bryce Kellerman and Officer Trevor Haskins under arrest on charges of evidence tampering, obstruction of justice, and conspiracy with an organized criminal enterprise." The courtroom erupted. Some applauded. Others wept. Michaela stayed silent, but in her eyes was the power of someone who had weathered the storm. Kellerman rose slowly, trying to appear stoic, but his hands visibly trembled. As the cuffs clicked shut, he glanced around, as if expecting someone to intervene. No one did. Across the aisle, Trevor Haskins turned ghost white. I was just following orders. I didn't know he was working with Strathmore. I swear. You have the right to remain silent. One of the agents cut him off. Michaela Trenton watched the two officers who had once unjustly shackled her, now being handcuffed by their own team. A strange symmetry when the cuffs changed hands. Derek Vaughn stood tall. His face carried fatigue, but his eyes gleamed with a fire brighter than ever. He leaned toward Michaela and said softly, "Looks like the game just flipped." Judge Vernon Ellery brought the gavel down. "This court is adjourned for 24 hours. We will reconvene tomorrow morning for expanded review, with federal representatives and internal affairs oversight present." He then turned to Michaela, and for the first time, his gaze was no longer cold, but tinged with respect. "Miss Trenton, I believe the entire country will want to hear your story." She didn't speak, just nodded once, eyes following the two black pawns of the system, now removed from the board. The game wasn't over, but the white pieces had just flipped the table. 1 week after the historic trial, as the media frenzy began to die down, a quiet headline appeared on the back page of the Charlotte Sentinel. Over $4.7 million in assets frozen, suspected in multi-state laundering scheme. Buried beneath it was a name that sent chill through anyone who had stood in his shadow. Gideon Strathmore. The U.S. Attorney's Office in Charlotte declined to comment in detail, only confirming that a wide-ranging federal investigation is ongoing, in coordination with multiple agencies, and a strategic witness under the internal codename Sigma Echo in the corner of a sealed case file. One name appeared in red ink, Michaela Trenton, not as a victim, but as the spark that ignited the investigation. "The game isn't over," said attorney Derek Vaughn during a televised roundtable. "We just forced the system to open its eyes. But the darkness, it's still moving." Monday morning, when Judge Vernon Ellery officially declared Michaela Trenton not guilty, thunderous applause echoed through North Shore Federal Court. It wasn't just relief. It was a spiritual eruption, like a weight had been lifted off the chests of everyone who still believed in justice. Even on the darkest days, Michaela stood. She nodded quietly to the jury. No tears, no cheer, just a slow, steady nod, as if on behalf of every person ever trapped in the system, without the voice to break free. Prosecutor Elaine Braxton left the courtroom immediately after the verdict. No apology, no glance back. Reporters rushed after her, microphones raised like antennae, but she offered only one sentence. This case should never have happened. Then she climbed into a silver SUV and slammed the door shut. Across local and national headlines, bold titles spread like wildfire. CIA agent framed, justice system shaken to the core. Michaela Trenton, from defendant to truth exposer. Briarfield police under full federal investigation. That afternoon, the mayor's office held an emergency press conference, announcing that Police Chief Harold Dempsey had resigned for personal reasons. But leaked reports told the truth. He was forced out for negligence and suspected complicity in internal misconduct within 10 days of the verdict. At least 7 officers were placed on suspension. A few quietly submitted resignation letters. The North Carolina State Oversight Board issued an emergency notice, launching a special police ethics review commission, an unprecedented move in state judicial history. But what captured the public more than anything was Michaela's silence. She gave no interviews, no talk shows, no op-eds. She simply went home to her small house in Maple Hollow, where Dolores Trenton stood, waiting with open arms, and a pot of beef stew simmering on the stove. "I'm home, Mama," Michaela said as she crossed the threshold. Dolores gently squeezed her daughter's hand and whispered, "You never left, baby. The system just needed you to fight one more time." At Willow Bend Community Center, Children swarmed her like she returned from a mission to the moon. "Miss Michaela, is it true you're a spy?" a wide-eyed boy asked. She smiled, tousling his hair. "I just help people read the right words. That's enough of a secret." At a legal symposium in Charlotte, attorney Derek Vaughn was asked what made Michaela's case the turning point of his career. He replied, "I used to think justice was a fire. The harder you burn it, the brighter it shines. But now I know it's a seed. It needs patience. It needs water. It must be protected from the dark. And when it sprouts, even a rotting forest will start to clear." And he was right. Michaela's trial didn't just free one woman. It forced an entire system to confront itself. It proved that even when lies reign, and power crushes the innocent, truth, if met with courage, can flip the whole game. Michaela didn't destroy the system. She made it correct itself. Months after the historic trial at North Shore Federal Court, her name still quietly moved through communities, like a living symbol, not of revenge, but of resolve, of sharp silence, and of unshakable belief in truth. She didn't chase headlines, didn't sign book deals, didn't appear on morning TV or high-profile podcasts. Instead, every morning, she rode her bike to Willow Bend Learning Center, picked up a piece of white chalk, and taught children how to read words like courage, justice, truth. Words she hadn't just read, she had lived them. From the settlement, following the civil lawsuit against the Briarfield Police Division, Michaela quietly founded the Trenton Fund, a nonprofit legal aid organization for those falsely accused within the justice system. No flashy ads, no big launch event, just a modest office tucked inside a worn red brick building near the train station. And yet, each month, dozens walk through its doors. Most leave with something they hadn't had before: hope. One day, an elderly woman with silver hair came all the way to the literacy center just to shake Michaela's hand. Her voice trembled. "You didn't just save yourself. You saved my faith." Michaela smiled softly, gently squeezing the woman's hand, eyes warm, but words few. That's who she had always been. Speak little, do more, and stand steady while the world trembles. As for Derek Vaughn, the Michaela case transformed him from a local defense attorney to a statewide voice for judicial reform. But every time he was honored, he'd repeat the same line: "I didn't save her. She saved herself. I was just standing beside her." One quiet spring evening, Michaela stood alone on the balcony of her small Maple Hollow home, a cup of warm tea in her hand, gazing at the budding trees in the distance. She thought of her father, the man who once taught her that justice doesn't always wear a robe or speak from a book. It lives in quiet acts of courage, in people who say no when everyone else says stay quiet. Michaela never saw herself as a hero, but she knew this much. If she hadn't held her ground that day, if she hadn't spoken the truth no one dared to, justice would have been buried forever beneath a duffel bag full of lies. She raised her cup and whispered thank you, not to fate, but to herself, for not bowing, for turning a pair of handcuffs into a symbol of freedom, and for reminding the world, when one woman stands up to injustice, an entire system can be made to tremble. Michaela Trenton's story wasn't just a courtroom drama. It wasn't just the downfall of the corrupt. It was proof that truth can be buried, but not extinguished. Whether you're an agent or just an ordinary citizen, what matters most is this: stand up when justice is distorted. Hold on to dignity when the world turns against you. If this story moved you, made you reflect, or simply kept you watching, we'd love to hear from you. Have you ever witnessed someone powerless rise against injustice? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you want to keep following stories that are raw, real, and unforgettable, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Mr. 7 Stories, where we bring you moments the news will never tell. Because sometimes, one story told at the right time can make the whole world take a second look.